Okay, I think we are live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube, live on Facebook, and who knows where else? Maybe even TikTok. Who knows? We're going to get started just a couple minutes earlier, at least get the live stream going. If you've been part of things like this before, you know it takes a few minutes for everyone to get connected, and so we'll give everybody a chance to get connected. We've got hundreds of you who are planning on joining at some point over the next 30 minutes. Our topic today is how do you stop the blame? All the excuses that we're hearing in a moment of uncertainty and disruption like we've been experiencing over the last 6 months or so. And how do you start creating a culture of accountability?
And a culture of accountability is so important because when do you hear the question, who's accountable? It's usually when it's too late. We got to flip that and get it asked way more in advance, way more proactively. So we've got a lot of really good stories and a lot of really good stuff to share with you on this event today.
So we'll be back to officially kick off the live event here in 3 minutes or so. We'll talk to you then. Woo! The data shows that people want to work for leaders who develop them and who listen to their ideas and opinions. Team members who feel heard, like their opinions are being considered, are always more engaged and take greater accountability for the results that we need them to deliver on.
How do we think? How do we act? How is it impacting our results? How do we want to think? How do we want to act? How do we need it to look so that we get better outcomes? We get there faster, we manage the culture that we need to have.
We were actually able to reduce our falls by 75% last year. Our issue really was about accountability and understanding that we needed to change the accountability model.
I've actually engaged in conversations with these leaders, and they actually start using me as a confidant and saying, you know what, I am so tired of hearing excuses. I don't understand why we can't get the results. And when I hear that, that is my cue to then introduce them to the process and the experiences that I've had with partners in leadership.
Culture can be a fluffy topic, but I believe it's all in the execution of how you treat culture. And so for us, we took it very seriously because I felt like, frankly, our organization was in jeopardy for a short time because we had all these competing cultures and this affinity to organizations where people came from. And so we really needed to forge a path forward so that everyone was marching toward our key results that we had to get done.
If things can go wrong, they really go wrong. Have you experienced that before? Like, oh my gosh, why is everything off the rails? So when things go wrong, it is human nature to come up with what? Excuses, right? To blame other people.
And the CEO made some comments in the closing comments of our meeting. So powerful. He said, I've come to the inconvenient and disgusting truth that it's all about me changing now. It was so good.
You know why that's such a big deal to us is because as we start working with organizations on creating a better culture and accelerating their movement toward the results, what tends to happen is everyone's looking elsewhere. So everybody's externalizing the need for change. And for that CEO to stand up at the end of that meeting, we can't script that. That changed the culture today. All righty, we are live on LinkedIn, a couple of different places on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and who knows where else. So glad that you're spending a little bit of time with us. It looks like we've got hundreds of folks who are planning on attending at some point over the next 30 minutes. I'm Russ Hill alongside my colleague Jared Jones. We're part of the team at Partners in Leadership, a firm that's been around for more than 3 decades now, helping organizations in all industries across the globe. How do you get people, what we help them do is create a culture of accountability. How do you get people to not become consumed, obsessed with, spend as much time on the blame game, what we call below the line, and we'll give you more insight to what that looks like in just a minute. And how do you get them to focus on what you need them to do, to take accountability. And then that actually raises the question, accountability for what? So we're going to dive into this, show you a lot of what we've learned as a firm over the last 3 decades or so.
We've written a ton on this topic. We've got multiple books on accountability, bestsellers, New York Times bestsellers, but we've also been practically involved with this topic with organizations all over the world for a long time. We've seen how this works when it's right there in the front lines. So we're going to dig in on that and go deep on that today. We want to start with looking at what's happening right now and what has been happening. When there's disruption or things are being thrown up in the air.
Let's start by seeing where people are connected from.
Oh, good idea.
I'd love to see where,
Yeah, go to the comments and throw in here. Where are you tuning in from? Where are you at? Where part of the world are you in when you're joining with us today? We'd love to see just little snippets here about where you're at. There's a little bit of a delay here, so we're going to see those comments coming in as you get those. But we'd love to hear from you on that, and maybe also just what's your role in the organization if you want to share something like that as well. But let's see some of those.
It's interesting how, on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or some of these other platforms, you have the chat window, right? Where you can make some comments. Here on LinkedIn or on YouTube or other places, you've got to actually make a comment. And so we've got people, I'm seeing a few comments coming in from, looks like Michigan. We've got a few folks, got several people on a team, it looks like, who are watching from New York and up in the Northeast. We've got St. Louis, Nashville, Arizona. Right.
Yeah, Aberdeen. There you go. So that's cool. At Dallas, Texas, they keep coming through. So that's cool to see. So when you think about what's happened for the last little while with disruption, this concept of 80-10 or 10-80-10 is what we like to call this. But it's really clear. It's clearly identifying how people react to these disruptions. And what you see with this is 10% of the people go into panic mode. And we all have we've watched people go into panic mode in these scenarios. And then you've got 10% at the top, though, that go into create mode. These people are proactively getting it done, making things happen. They don't need direction. They're not waiting to be told what to do. The problem is we have this massive chunk, 80% of the people are stuck in this stunned mode. Yeah. Now, the key to the stunned mode is they're willing to move. They're just not sure how or what to do.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Just a quick comment on this. Anytime disruption happens, we see this. This happened immediately in March, and we were on the phone with a pharmaceutical company that we've been working with for quite some time. They're still seeing this play out, even though we're months deep into this disruption, because nobody knows what a month from now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now looks like. And so the panic
think back to March, Russ. We were talking about September, like, oh, this is going to be well done by September, right? Yeah. Or July. We were even thinking about July at one point. So now you've got people not only experiencing the first iteration of this whole thing, now they're dealing with the disruption that it's not gone yet. And so you've still got that kicking in.
Right. So this 10% roughly of an organization or a team that's in panic mode, these are the people who still on October 1st are in the fetal position in the corner. Like, what happened in 2020? I don't want to deal with it. And I'm just over here hoping that it goes away soon. The stun group, Jared, this group is, as you said, they're awaiting direction. They think they're agile because of their willingness to innovate and try new things. But the key there, the challenge with that stun group that makes up the majority of teams in most of our organizations is they're not actually innovating. They're not actually really thinking about how we should be doing things differently. And then that 10% and create, the 10% in the create group, I like to think about them as the folks who are comfortable driving in fog. They slow down, they assess the situation, right? They leave more distance between them and the car in front of them. But the key to the people in the create group is they don't stop moving. And so, Jared, if you'll advance the slide, here's what we want to do. Here's what we need to do in our organizations and on our teams. And we'll tie this to accountability in just a moment as we get ready to show you a model that we've been working with clients on for decades now. We want to get as many people into that create group as possible. The question becomes, well, how do you do that?
Yeah, and when you think about what that looks like, it's how do you create accountability for the right things? When we talk about activity and results, these two things, it's amazing how many people get stuck focused on the activity and not the results. If you ask people, what's your job? How do they respond? They respond with activities typically. And we define that as the actions people take that lead to results. Well, the results are the desired and undesired outcomes of taking action. So you're always producing results. You cannot be on a team and sit back and say, well, I had nothing to do with that. Well, we all are touching the results in some way, shape, or form. The question is, are we getting the results we want? So when we talk about accountability, we're not talking about activity for the sake of activity. You know, a great story of this is if anyone's ever been to Lake Powell, Russ and I both love going to Lake Powell, and Russ has an amazing story here, but I'll set it up for him. You rent these massive houseboats. They're 60, 70 feet long. And you're on this lake where when a monsoon kicks up or a rainstorm comes through, the winds get really strong. Now they go away fast. It lasts 20, 30 minutes. But when it's happening, it's crazy. And these big boats are like kites. They catch the wind and go, and your anchors sometimes can pop. Russ, tell us the story of when you had that happen.
Yeah, both of our families have had traditions over the years of going to Lake Powell. It's on the Utah-Arizona border. Picture the Grand Canyon about halfway filled up with water. It's just amazing with these red rock cliffs. So as Jared mentions, the monsoons come in and it can really disrupt the water. If you've been on a boat on a lake or some water when a storm comes in, you know exactly what we're talking about. So we had our houseboat. This is a few years ago. We had our houseboat anchored, you know, ropes tied up and anchored deep in the sand. The winds came, and we had some friends in a different houseboat just a little bit down the beach on this lake. And as the winds came, they broke some of our ropes. And so the houseboat started to shift towards this other houseboat. The one we were on started to move. So that's extremely dangerous for all kinds of reasons. So we can laugh about it now. My wife laughs about it quite a bit. But as that happened and people started yelling, everyone sprung into action because we've been disrupted. Something has happened. I mean, if you think about comparisons to this year, you can think of many. What my wife did, because she never drives a houseboat, a few of us do. And so she's thinking, well, what do I do? So the first thing she thought to do was go grab the vacuum cleaner. And so she just starts vacuuming the houseboat, which clearly isn't.
I just have to do something.
Right. And when you think about this activity versus results, we're accountable for what? A lot of us in 2020, we might either be playing the blame game full of excuses, or we're taking accountability to be busy. But the vacuum cleaner doesn't help out a lot when you need to protect or steer the ship in a different direction. So as you think about this accountability for what, this is one of the first messages or things we wanted to point out to you is accountability for results is a game changer.
And it begins with clearly defining the results. It's not the end all be all. It's just where it starts. Once you've got clarity around the results that you need to achieve, now you can ask people to be taking accountability to deliver on that. And that's where we go into this next question. We want you to go back into your comments, and we want to see what you would answer on this question. Are your key results clearly defined and understood throughout your organization? Yes or no? We've asked this question a bazillion times. We've got some data that we're going to share with you here, though. But just real quick, go into the comments, type in, are they understood, clearly defined and understood? Now, remember, those are two things.
Yeah, and Jared, I'd say think about the front line, right? And we're not asking if you understand the key results. We're asking about in typical organization, an organization like yours, do you think the front line, the folks who are individual contributors, you could even include some managers in there as well, some parts of leadership. Type in the comments on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, wherever you're connected right now. In the comment, type in what percentage do you think, yes, they clearly understand the results. They're understood and defined.
Yeah, let's throw some percentages in there. That's a great idea. Throw some, what percentage of the organization would answer the same way? So they would give you the same number, the same metric, the same topic. And if they did give you the same one, what percentage of people would answer the same way, right? So as you think through that and think about how people would actually react to that, we've asked this question a lot. And so we'll just give you some of the numbers as we see these coming in. We're seeing a bunch of you saying, no, they're not done yet. We need to do some more work on this. That's exactly what we find. What we find is this: 86% of of respondents will say no. They're not clearly defined and understood. And think about the two things. It's one thing to define them. It's another to make sure there's understanding around them. And that leads us to this. This model is what we call the steps to accountability. There's a line that separates this model in the middle. We refer to that as the line. It's really creative, right? Below the line is the blame game. It's all the excuses, the things we typically hear to get us off the hook to explain and justify why we're not delivering on those results that we've clearly defined and created understanding around. Now, when you're below the line, you're typically focused on everything you can't control. What we really need to do, though, is get people to move above the line. And when we're above the line, we're focused on what we can control versus what we can't. We're taking the steps to see it, own it, solve it, and do it.
Yeah, and a few questions that we would ask you, and in fact, it'd be great for you to respond to this in the comments. Just make a comment on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're tuning in right now. We've got you from around the world, it looks like. The question is this. The first question is, yes, and it's a yes or no question. Is it wrong? Is it wrong to go below the line? As you look there at, those different aspects of the blame game, ignore, deny, it's not my job, wait and see, finger pointing, cover your tail. The question becomes, is it wrong to go there? Yes or no? So just type into the comments, just a quick answer, yes or no, or any thought you have around the question, is it wrong to go below the line? What do you think about that? Yes or no?
Seeing a bunch of no's, no. Yeah, when you think about what it means to be below the line, it's real. There are things pushing on all of us that are outside of our control. And the more things that are outside of your control, the harder it is to get above the line. The easier it is to get stuck below the line and all the excuses. So it's not wrong to go there. It's actually wrong to stay there. Don't set up camp and live down there. And if you think about these things, ignore, deny is just, sometimes we don't even know. I didn't know that was something we were supposed to do, or it's not my job. Hey, I wasn't asked to do that or trained to do that. Finger pointing, if it was just that department or that group or the environment or the weather, whatever that looks like. Confusion, tell me what to do, is the sinkhole of accountability. It's just staying confused. Anyone can stay confused. Just tell me what to do, because if you tell me what to do, you're accountable, not me. And then cover your tail. This is the evidence file. It's the email we sent with CCing everybody and blind copying everybody in the company. And the last one, wait and see. This is, well, just wait and hope. Wait and hope it gets better versus actually taking action to do something different.
So here's the challenge that so many teams and organizations have. The word accountability is heavy. It's viewed negatively. You think about when that question comes up, who's accountable? That question is the cue to duck, cover, and hide, right? Because somebody somewhere is looking to bust somebody over why we didn't achieve this thing. And so accountability isn't well defined. We don't have a positive definition around it. We don't have a shared definition. So when you have this model of accountability where it's, Jared, if you'll go back to above and below the line, the main model of steps to accountability, when you've got language that's sticky and shared throughout an organization, and you as a leader can say, hey, I feel like, team, we're below the line right now on whatever might be. We're stuck in wait and see, or we're waiting for corporate to give us more direction on what to do, or we're stuck in ignore, deny. We're pretending like this whole COVID-19 or whatever aspect of all the commotion in the world that's affecting your business right now, we pretend like, well, when it goes away, things can get better. So when there's language of, well, how do we get above the line? What you tend to find is that accelerates conversations around how to take accountability and what it looks like.
And it makes a massive difference. Just the language alone, the awareness alone, you yourself, catching yourself. I promise you after this today, you're going to do something later today. You're going to be writing an email in a meeting and you're going to catch yourself going, oh, wow, that was below the line. And that's great. That's brilliant. If you don't see yourself going below the line, you're an ignore, deny. That's just the reality of how that works. We all go there from time to time. So the key is not to get down on ourselves when we do. The key is to minimize the amount of time we spend down there so that we can get to this. What does it look like to move above the line? Moving above the line is to take the 4 steps, see it, own it, solve it, and do it. Each of these steps has a specific question around it that can prompt and guide you to continue to move through these steps. See it. The question is, what's the reality I need to acknowledge? We all have things that we're dealing with, and there are realities around those things that you can't change, can't do anything about. That's just a reality you have to deal with. So getting clear on the realities you have to acknowledge, and also being clear on the realities around what do we need? What information do we need? That question will drive all that curiosity and understanding around seeing it. And seeing it, by the way, is the hardest step.
Right.
It's the first one above the line, and it's the hardest one.
Well, Jared, let me ask this question. I'd love those of you that are tuned in. Again, another question in the comment window here on LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever you're at. Answer this question. I'd love your perspective. So when we run into an obstacle, or we're running into a challenge or uncertainty, all the stuff we've been dealing with in 2020, which one of these steps above the line do you think most people in leadership roles, management roles, go to first?
It's a great
See
question.
it, own it, solve it, do it. Which one of those steps do we as leaders tend to jump to whenever we hit disruption or whenever we hit an obstacle? Just type that into the comments section. And which one do you think it is?
There's a lot of alignment on this answer very quickly from our
There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just what's your perspective? Is it see it? Is it own it? Is it solve it or do it? One of the fun things about when you do these lives on social media, it's different than like on Zoom. Because when someone types something you ask a question on Zoom or Microsoft Teams, you immediately see the response. You all are seeing us 10 seconds later. And so it takes, we have to say it then wait a few minutes until you hear the question.
Yeah, and here it all comes. Solve it. Right? We hear that every time we ask that question. We love to solve problems. We run right to solve it.
Right. And Jared, the reason for that, you're absolutely right. Our experience teaching this model with organizations that we work with around the globe is they answer it the same way that you do. People jump to solve it. Why do we do that? Well, as leaders, that's how we earned this chair, this seat in the organization, right? We solve things. We do them. We execute. We see a problem. We overcome it.
We make it happen.
Right. But when we're in a leadership role, that becomes a different scenario. So what's more important when we run into that obstacle as leaders is to make sure as leaders we're allowing our team and ourselves to spend time and see it, which prompts the question, why is that critical, Jared?
Yeah, well, if you don't see it, actually, if you don't see it and own it, if you look at what we just said, if we jump to solve it and we fail to see it and own it, you could be solving all the wrong problems. You could be solving things that are actually taking you down the wrong road. Seeing it is critical to making sure that you're pointing yourself in the right direction when it comes to solve it. So see it as the first step. The next step is own it. And own it has everything to do with one question. How am I involved? How am I contributing to this in any way, good or bad? What's my involvement looking like on this? Because it's really important to know if I'm a barrier to what we need to do or if I'm helping us get to where we need to go. So that own it piece, how am I contributing to this, also leads to the solve it question, which is, well, what else can I or we, what else can we do? Notice that question is not what more can I do? It's what else. Sometimes you need to stop doing certain things and start doing other things. But it's what else, thinking differently about how to solve the problem, create the result that we need to create. Right, Russ?
Yeah, we've got a couple more slides we want to show you in the next few minutes, but I'm looking at the clock, realizing that we've got just a few more minutes left with you. As we go into these next few slides here in a moment, we at the end, the last few minutes, we'd love to answer any questions that you want to type into the comments now. What have we not addressed, or what have we brought up that you need further clarity around, or you're listening to us going, okay, that sounds good, but help me with this. So go to the comments and whatever platform you're watching this on right now, what question do you have around accountability, or what specifically are you struggling with as a leader, or do you see in your organization or on your team around accountability that we could perhaps add some value or insight to in our years of working on this. So quickly, before we go to the next couple of slides, Jared, I just want to share an example, and it's around this see it, own it, solve it, do it step. So one of the organizations we work with is a manufacturing company, and we've been working with them for well over a decade, creating a culture of accountability, not just in one or two people, but with thousands of people, in this case, tens of thousands at this organization. How do we get people and teams to really think from an accountable standpoint about the results we need to deliver? And so when COVID hit, COVID-19 back in March, and who can forget that experience, right? As we all watched the world shutting down. And one of the phone calls we got was from one of the leaders of a division or a part of the company, a business area of this manufacturing company, a food services company. And this senior leader's team, he has hundreds of sales reps around the country, around the United States, that are responsible for selling food to these three categories of businesses: restaurants and universities and hotels. Okay.
No problem. No problem.
Think about March, think about April. Universities, what was happening there? Everybody being sent home. Hotels, like a bunch of them were shut down. That nobody was coming in. Even if they were open, there was hardly anybody there. And then the last category is restaurants. What did the restaurants in your neighborhood or city look like in March and April? There's nobody there. So we get on the phone with this leader, and he's going, oh my gosh, we were having a phenomenal year. And all of a sudden this disruption hits, and we've got, how could you help but be below the line, focused on what you can't control? And so the process that we began to walk that team through is we got on a Zoom meeting with over 300 sales reps and their leaders from around the country. As Jared and I were teaching this model and beginning to work with them, the questions were around see it, own it, solve it, and do it, right? What's the reality we need to acknowledge? What part of it do we need to own? How do we need to be thinking differently? What does solve it look like? And do it. What are we going to do out of this Zoom meeting, out of this virtual meeting? What are we going to do, and when are we going to do it by? So you can kind of see the framework of doing that.
And do it is quite simply who's going to do what by when. So
Right.
if you think about those things that we just talked about, how do you really operationalize see it, own it, solve it, do it? You ask those 4 questions. What's the reality I need to acknowledge? How am I contributing? What else can I do? And who's going to do what by when? And when you create a culture of accountability like that, you get these kinds of results.
So we've got several questions that are coming in from you. We're going to get to those in a minute. But before we do that, Jared, why don't we share these definitions of accountability?
So the dictionary definition of accountability right out of Webster's is subject to having to explain, report, justify, answerable, responsible. Those red boxes you see are the words that make it sound really below the line. It is not an above the line definition. Our definition, coming right out of the book we wrote 30 years ago, The Oz Principle, is a personal choice to rise above one's circumstances and demonstrate the ownership necessary for achieving your key results. In short, it is to see it, own it, solve it, and do it. Go ahead, Russ. You had something to add?
Yeah. So accountability, it's interesting when you think about what's the difference between someone who spends a lot of time below the line. You've got people in your life, like that, right? You're related to them. You might live with them.
Some people have spent much of their lives below the line.
Why don't you type their name into the chat? I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding with you. But you can think about them, or they're on your team, or you report into them, or they're in that other department. The challenge here is we can so quickly, when the word accountability comes up, think about who needs the message you've just heard for the last 20 minutes. And what accountability really is looking in the mirror and making a choice, a personal choice to resist the urge, which, oh my gosh, is so hard in 2020. You want to look at people who aren't resisting the urge to focus on what they don't control. Go to Twitter or Facebook and just start reading comments. There's a lot of people consumed with what they don't control right now. So accountability is a personal choice. I'm not going to spend I might need to go there for a few minutes just to, let it out. But then I make a choice to get above the line and focus my mental energy, my physical energy today, tomorrow, on what I can impact. So,
and it's a breath of fresh air when you choose to take accountability, because you put yourself back in the driver's seat. You're not victim to everything happening around you. You're taking action. You're moving. You're doing something that's pushing you in the right direction.
Yes.
And when you've got,
go ahead.
When you've got lots of people doing that, this is what the numbers show. You get 73% more enthusiastic to go to work, 90% more likely to recommend your organization as a great place to work. We get better at working across the organization to handle things fast. And we are way more willing to navigate the changes that we see. And this one we were really impressed by. Product launches are 63% more likely to be successful. Think about how a product launch is impacted by all the other things we just listed here. You can see those correlations, and your own experience will tell you that those correlations are true.
Yeah, right. So we have, before we go to the questions that have been coming in, we're going to spend our last few minutes on these questions. We want to offer you something. And when we start working with an organization and on creating a culture of accountability, you can imagine there's some research that we do as a firm up front, digging into, well, what shifts are needed in the culture? What's the narrative of this organization or this team? What are the go-to excuses? What are the results that we need to get aligned around to make sure that we are delivering on? And so as you dig into that research, you start to see where the accountability and culture gaps are. So what we want to offer to all of you, anybody that's watching this live or that views this, the recording of this, we want to offer you a free team culture score. It's a light version, if you will, of our proprietary Culture Advantage Index that we do with our clients. It takes about 5 minutes to answer the questions, and then what you get is a report just for your team. What's your culture score for your team? Where are the gaps in accountability right now? Again, this is based on the research that we've done and the work we've done over the last 3 decades. So the place to find that free team culture score is at myculturescore.com. If you go to myculturescore.com, it takes 5 minutes and it will walk you through the questions and it will give you a report of what your team culture score is. We're really excited to offer that to you today.
Yeah, and we'd love to chat with you about it too. If you'd be interested in hearing from us or talking with us more, you can direct message Russ or I on LinkedIn. We'll react to that. We'll give you thoughts. We're going to get into some questions now and take a few minutes to go through some of your questions. But if we didn't get to your question and you want to dig in more, just reach out to Russ or I directly, and we'll be happy to do that. Okay, so some of you are going to need to sign off because you got your next appointment. You're only blocked off here from Pacific time, 12 to 12:30, 3 to 3:30 Eastern. We're going to stick around for a few more minutes. You can always stay with us, or you can come back and watch the recording of this later. But we're going to get into some of your questions here. Okay, Stacy asked this one. Jared, you want to read it and maybe start to address it? When your boss is camped out below the line, it's really hard. The first thing you have to start doing is interacting with them by asking a series of questions. A great question is, well, why aren't we making the progress? And you let them kind of go out with all the excuses, all the things they'll come out fast. Well, which of those are most important for us to deal with? Have them focus in on one or two. And then start facilitating the question, well, what else could we do? Are we going to be held accountable if we don't deliver on this? Asking that question is useful as well. And then you get to, so what are we going to do and by when? And you get to get really specific. That's a coaching model we teach. I went through it in like 10 seconds when it usually is something we can spend hours on. But it starts with, what are the issues? What are the reasons why we're not delivering? Get focused on one or two that we most need to impact. What else can we do? And then who's going to do what by when? It's just walking you through, see it, own it, solve it, do it. It's a great way to manage up by asking questions and move the team. Diana asked this question: how are you holding training in a virtual environment? You know, it's funny, Diana. I'll answer your question in a moment, but I have to tell you a quick story first. So in March, Jared and I, along with some colleagues of ours from our firm, part of our team on working with this manufacturing company, we were in up in the Northeast, I guess is what I would say. And we had this meeting with over 150 members of this team, and we were debriefing with the leadership team afterwards. And they said, you know, this has been so helpful. This is a really good discussion. We got people all over the world. Can't we do this virtually? And Jared and I said, no, you can't have these sorts of conversations virtually. You need to be in the room together. Yeah, that was March. Those are words we have eaten. Disruption forces all of us to innovate. And so in the line of work we do, sure, it can be more valuable, more impactful to be sitting knee to knee, to be able to read body language and look into your eyes. We talk about whether it's alignment around results or getting above the line. But Diana, to answer your question, the way we do this, and I think I'm answering your question, Jared, you might read it a different way, but here's how I would answer it.
we're doing a ton of these meetings in Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, right? The platforms of choice. And a lot of them are 60 to 90 minutes long. Several of our clients are having us or members of our firm come in once a month or maybe it's a couple of times a quarter, whatever that looks like, and have discussion around this. The beautiful thing is Zoom allows these breakout rooms. So you can have 150 people or 15 in the main room and then do breakouts. Some of you have seen that happen, right? And ask them, hey, go out and work on this issue with 2 of your colleagues for 5 minutes and then come back and let's have the discussion. We've been amazed at how well that is replicated the in-person experience. Anything you'd add on that, Jared?
Well, the other side of that I would add is the people have bought into virtual now, where before they weren't bought into virtual. So it failed because everyone was multitasking and doing 6 different things and they weren't paying attention, where we've all changed our mindset. Everyone has. This has been a sea change in how we view virtual versus in-person. So we're actually finding them to be extremely successful.
Okay, next question, Jared.
How do you get buy-in? That's a great question, Jenny. Buy-in is really about the case for change. Why do we need to do it? The why is often missed. We don't talk about the why. We just tell people what, go do this and do it by this time. But when you get the why really clearly established, that's when you get people to move. We like to say this: people work hard for money. They work harder for a good leader, but they work the hardest for a cause. So do you have your cause clearly laid out with the why behind it? That's how you get people to buy in.
Yeah, the other thing I'd say is we're talking about virtual, just real quick going back to that, because I'm seeing several comments come in around virtual. If it would be helpful if you're thinking about your team or some part of your organization that you think needs to see some of what we've talked about today, Jared and I are more than happy to do that for your team, a team of people inside the organization for free of charge. We wouldn't do that. We would do that for 60 minutes, just one-time meeting, going over some of the slides we just showed you. The way to do that, the way to get us to do that is to direct message Jared or I. So if you're not a first connection with us here on LinkedIn, if that's where you're watching this, just send us a connection request and then a direct message with, hey, you'd be interested in us doing this for your team. And we've got, of course, license on Zoom and some different platforms, and we'd be happy to host that. If that would be valuable and you think, man, we really need to have this conversation around accountability. As you've noticed over the last 30 minutes, we don't come in heavy-handed on accountability. That doesn't work. If you come in talking about, we need more accountability around here, everybody goes, oh my gosh, how do I get out of this?
They go below the line when you do that. They drop right down and say, let me tell you why I can't do that.
Right. And so you have to acknowledge that we all go there. It's human nature to go below the line. And right now in the world we're living in, it's a battle every hour. Yeah. With kids on Zoom classes and, restaurants doing what they're doing in business and the economy affecting us and health, as you look around, so many things pulling the election in America, so many things that could be pulling us below the line to focus on things we can't control. So we try to address it. And we have as a firm over the last 3 decades from a positive, forward-looking way. Anything else, Jared, you'd say before we wrap up?
I would just say go to myculturescore.com, take advantage of that offer. It's really insightful, even just going through and asking yourself the questions. We're happy to chat with you. Get yourself above the line as much as you can. Remember, it's not wrong to go below the line. It's just wrong to get stuck below the line. So take a moment and vent, and then focus on what else can you do to get above the line.
It's been great to be with all of you. Appreciate your comments and your participation over the last 35 minutes or so. Hope you're healthy. Hope you're doing well. If we can help you or your organization in any way, direct message us. Take care.